The crater was shaped like a mouth frozen mid-scream, wide and jagged and filled with bones, though most of them belonged to machines. Jagged titanium ribs, rusted claws, twisted coils of synth flesh clung to the wrecks of war forms that had once torn through the sky like gods. Now they were grave markers, ornamental in a way. She sat at the center of the ruin, cross-legged on the broken hull of what had once been a diplomatic carrier, now as diplomatic as a shovel. Her armor hissed softly every few minutes as its climate system fought the moon's bitter wind. Dust clung to her pauldrons and helmet. A long crack ran from her left shin plate to the knee, as if some ancient grievance had been etched in her skin. She hadn't moved in hours. She barely blinked. Flick, the one functioning companion she tolerated, chirped from a mound of debris nearby. I must once again remind you that sustained periods of emotional repression are highly inefficient, Commander. I'll write a memo, she said. Shall I format it in Imperial Standard or in Unreadable due to brooding? Surprise me. The droid whirred closer on a cracked wheel, its photoreceptors flickering like a candle in a windstorm. It was barely half a meter tall and shaped like a trash bin that had once flirted with the idea of military utility. Varela hadn't repaired its voice module deliberately. She found the glitch in its sarcasm routine soothing. Statistical probability of rescue in current location, 0.008%. I have rounded generously. She replied. Then stop watching the sky. She didn't mention that she had stopped watching it too. It only made her ears ring. Somewhere deep beneath the crust of the moon, ancient generators groaned in their sleep, half dead, dreaming in nuclear size. The sun here was distant and red, the sky a color that had no name in any living language, somewhere between raw magnetism and despair. 364 days ago, assuming Flick's internal calendar hadn't lost its mind, they'd crash-landed during what had initially been called a diplomatic retreat. The retreating part had been accurate. The diplomacy had involved Varela decapitating her commanding officer after learning he had signed a surrender treaty with 3 corporate warlords in exchange for a chair on a yacht. There had been a council vote on her execution. It had passed. They'd called it necessary for morale. She'd survived, unfortunately. The wind shifted. Flick froze mid-analysis of derelict fuel lines. Varela's ears twitched. She rose slowly, the joints in her armor groaning like a tired choir. Then came the sound. Footsteps. Not the weightless hiss of scavenger drones. Not the thudding skitter of moonlurkers. Not the clanking of a limb-heavy security crawler. These were boots. Human boots. Varela pulled her sidearm, a compact plasma cutter shaped like a crescent of bad intentions. Her finger hovered near the trigger as she watched the edge of the crater. The wind howled again. The light faded, and then a voice said conversationally, "Wow, this place is cozy. Love what you've done with the corpses." She blinked. A man emerged from the dust cloud like a hallucination. Tallish, wrapped in a patched exo-jacket clearly meant for temperate zones, not exo-moons. His beard was uneven. His boots were frayed at the edges. He was carrying for some reason a thermal thermos and a small folding chair. He stopped, glanced around the wreckage, and smiled with the deep, slightly panicked energy of someone trying very hard to pretend everything was normal. "Mind if I sit?" he said. She said nothing. "I'll take that as a yes. Or a very tense maybe." He popped the chair open and plopped into it with the sort of reckless comfort only a human could summon while staring down the barrel of a disintegration pistol. She kept the weapon raised. "Nice sidearm," he said. "Is that a Phase 2 Ilari design? Thought those were collector's items now." Silence. He offered her the thermos. "Coffee? What are you doing here?" See, now that's a good question." He unscrewed the thermos lid and poured a bit into the cap. "I ask myself that all the time. What am I doing here? Why is this crater full of mechanical intestines? Should I have stopped at that one gas moon with the sentient vending machines?" Varela's aim did not falter. "You are trespassing. Technically, this moon is unclaimed." "It is mine." "Well, then I respectfully apologize for intruding. Do you validate parking?" She blinked once. Flick rolled cautiously into view, scanning him. Unregistered male human, civilian, no known military credentials, suspected cognitive disorder. "Hi, Flick," the man said cheerfully. "Heard about you from a black market mechanic on Fenra 5. You're famous. I am also armed." "Neat." Varela lowered her weapon an inch. "Who sent you?" No one. I was just passing through. Dareth's on the fringe of a salvage route. Figured I'd see if there was anything worth salvaging. There isn't. Beg to differ, he said, and then took a sip of coffee and winced. Okay, yeah, this stuff's awful. I may have left it on the engine block a bit too long. You're insane. Probably, but in fairness, most sane people wouldn't come out here. So that means either I'm crazy or you're fascinating. I'll assume both for now. Virella exhaled through her nose. Name: Callan Thorne, Terra Restoration Specialist and part-time botanist. I brought a plant. He rummaged in his jacket and pulled out a plastic container with a small green sprout inside. It looked deeply offended to be here. You're growing a plant, she said slowly, on a dead moon. Well, trying to. It keeps giving me dirty looks. Flick rolled away, muttering something about impending doom. Virella stared at the man. She didn't understand him. Not his presence, not his tone, not his defiance of every survival protocol. She didn't trust it. But for the first time in 364 days, something new had arrived. Something human. And it was drinking her coffee. The plant did not die. Against every reasonable expectation in most known agricultural laws, it remained alive in its cramped little container, propped against a rock that looked like it had been insulted by time. Virella checked it once when Callan wasn't looking. Just once. It was stupid, really. Barely 2 green shoots curling toward the sky like they were stretching after a nap. But she didn't vaporize it, which was, all things considered, a generous act of diplomacy. Callan had declared the area around the wreck Base C, which stood for Coffee Crater. She told him that was idiotic. He agreed, but said it was better than Base A and Base B, which had been located on an asteroid infested with psychic moss and a landfill moon, respectively. He was either brave, hopelessly naive, or deeply allergic to social cues. Possibly all three. He set up a small tent, constructed from parts of an old solar sail, and lined it with thermal netting. He hung what she assumed was laundry, but looked suspiciously like spare socks sacrificed in ritual. Then he built a stove from a scavenged battery cell, a frying pan, and something he swore used to be part of a missile guidance system. She ignored most of this, save for the day he burned something that set off the chemical alarms in her armor. You've weaponized breakfast, she said through a coughing fit. It was supposed to be synthetic eggs, he replied, poking the charred remains with a spork. Apparently they were stored too close to a volatile isotope. They're now quantumly scrambled. Flick rolled by, paused, and displayed a blinking red icon shaped like a skull. Hazard rating: deliciously irresponsible. Thank you, Flick, Callan said. Your sarcasm chip is still my favorite war crime. They fell into a strange rhythm. Callan wandered the edges of the crater during the day, mapping radiation currents and searching for things that might technically qualify as edible. Virella kept an eye on the skies, watched the atmospheric sensors, and occasionally threatened a meteor with her sidearm out of sheer boredom. She didn't talk much. He did, mostly to himself, sometimes to her, and very frequently to the plant. See, this is how you grow, he told it one morning, while gently misting it with water he'd reclaimed from his own recycled sweat. You get light, nutrients, and absolutely no existential dread. That part's optional. Virella leaned against the skeletal wing of a fallen shuttle. You know it can't hear you. Oh, I'm aware, Callan said, but if it starts talking back, I'd appreciate you not vaporizing it, unless it insults your ears. They're not sensitive. They're majestic. Honestly, I'm jealous. I tried getting elongated ears once. Bad phase in college. Ended up with a fungal infection and a court order to stay away from cosmetic nanobots. She tried not to smile. It crept into the edge of her mouth anyway. He noticed, said nothing. At night, the moon cooled to its usual deathly chill. Callan insisted on building a fire pit, even though Virella's armor regulated internal temperatures. He did it anyway, muttering about the psychological benefits of shared suffering. She sat near the fire. Not close, but not far. He told her about his job, restoring dead worlds, turning toxic lands into breathable gardens. He spoke of the Terra bacteria he cultured in orbital labs, the genetically enhanced vines that could absorb radiation, and the time he accidentally regrew half a rainforest inside a customs office. Customs wasn't happy, he said, but the monkeys were thrilled. She asked why he kept doing it. His hands were calloused, his coat stitched with a dozen failed patches. He had no weapons, no empire, nothing but stubborn hope and a caffeine addiction that bordered on medical concern. Because someone has to clean up after the rest of you, he said lightly, then softened. I figure if I can make one place a little better, maybe it matters, even if nobody notices. She didn't answer right away. Then, most people just leave when they see me. I'm not most people, he said. That's obvious. Another night, she finally asked. Do you know who I am? He shrugged. I've heard rumors. Can't say I trust galactic gossip, though. Half of it thinks you're dead. The other half thinks you ascended to some sort of space godhood. One article claimed you turned into mist and joined a sentient nebula. That one had fan art. She groaned. I don't care about any of it, he added. You're not a myth to me. You're just you. And that doesn't frighten you? Should it? She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The silence was enough. Later, when she returned from a patrol, she found he'd drawn a face on Flick with a marker. The droid rolled up to her, displaying it proudly. Callan has enhanced my interface, it declared. Do you like my eyebrows? She stared at the crude eyebrows and mustache drawn on its chassis. You allowed this, she asked. I was sedated with motor oil, Flick said. Flick's a good sport, Callan said. Also, I think he secretly likes it. I do not, Flick added, then paused. But I will allow one more doodle. That night, the sky lit briefly with the remnants of a passing cargo vessel, a streak of orange fire trailing behind it. Varela stared up at it long after it vanished. You miss it? Callan asked. What? Up there, all of it. The power, the command, the chaos. She hesitated. I miss being needed, she said. He poked at the fire. You're needed here, by a very emotional plant and a sarcastic droid, and maybe, just maybe, by one extremely stubborn human. She looked at him, not as a trespasser, not as a threat, just a man sitting beside a fire, sharing his warmth with a queen fallen from orbit. And the warmth, against all odds, did not make her flinch. The moon cracked again, not metaphorically, though plenty of that was going around, but literally. A sound like distant thunder rolled beneath their feet as a tectonic fault split somewhere beneath the valley of ruined satellites. Callan dropped his mug. Flick promptly rolled over it with a satisfied chirp. That was a 7.0 tremor, Flick announced unprompted, approximately the same magnitude as your last attempt at scrambled eggs. Varela stood at the edge of the crater, unmoved. That was not a natural shift. Callan poked at the remains of his shattered mug with a boot. You saying there's such a thing as an unnatural earthquake? Here, yes. Flick rolled to a nearby console jury-rigged from 3 drone cores and the shattered remains of a diplomatic translator. Seismic disturbance located approximately 2.3 kilometers southeast. Energy signatures inconsistent with tectonic movement. Recommend investigation. Callan adjusted his backpack and sighed. Let me guess. It's either a buried weapons cache or a very large alien beast that feeds on irony. Likely neither, Varela said, but we'll bring explosives just in case. The trek across the cracked plain was an exercise in collective complaint. Flick sputtered about his wheel alignment. Callan recited poetry from a book he'd found lodged in the stomach of a deactivated maintenance bot. Varela, as always, said little, though she did raise an eyebrow when he started on a haiku about space mold. They reached the site near what had once been a subterranean hangar, half collapsed, buried under layers of magnetic ash, and memories best left unspoken. Varela brushed aside a panel with a gauntlet that hissed under the strain. Callan peered down into the newly formed chasm. So, good news or bad news first? Neither. Just drop the drone. He released a small orb from his belt, and it zipped into the crevice, humming softly. The feed projected into Flick's interface, which now sported new eyebrows shaped like lightning bolts. Descending, the drone announced. Detecting stable floor at 42 meters. Atmospheric composition, 97% toxic, 1% oxygen, 2% something that just growled at me. Varela leapt down without hesitation. Callan blinked. Is that a local custom? You just jump into holes when you feel like it? Yes, Flick replied, already deploying his descent thrusters. You're very behind on local etiquette. Callan muttered something about peer pressure and slid down using a grappling line. He landed with a graceless thump, promptly stepping into a puddle of what appeared to be sentient tar. Okay, that's definitely looking at me. Don't step in it again, Varela said. You say that like I meant to. The chamber was vast, once a docking bay, now a crypt. Rows of sleek fighter shells lined the walls like teeth in a predator's jaw. The floor was littered with data shards and long-dead service drones, many of them fused into the bulkheads as if they tried to escape through them. At the center stood a pod, not a cargo pod, not a cryobed, something older, something imperial. Varela approached it slowly. Callan frowned. "You're doing that look again." "What look?" "The one where you recognize some long-lost piece of military horror and are debating whether or not to shoot it before it remembers how to scream." She examined the pod's control panel. The glyphs were faint but unmistakable. This was built during the 9th expansion. That would make it 200 years old. "Anything inside?" Flick buzzed a scan. "Organic signature detected. Minimal neural activity. Life signs stable. Cryostasis integrity at 62%. Callan leaned closer. "You think it's friendly?" "No. Optimism isn't your strong suit, is it?" She pressed a sequence on the panel. The pod hissed, releasing decades of vacuum pressure in a rush of breath that smelled faintly of ozone and betrayal. The lid retracted. Inside lay a humanoid figure. Not quite alien, not quite machine. A hybrid. Eyes closed, body encased in armor that pulsed faintly with internal energy. A mark burned into its chest plate, a stylized symbol shaped like a broken sun. Callan stepped back. "That's not a good sign." Varela stared at the mark. "That's a waker," Flick sputtered. Clarification requested. Waker as in peaceful diplomat? Or waker as in bioweapon designed to reset planetary civilizations with extreme prejudice? "The second one." "Wonderful," Callan said, "because our lives weren't already full of spice and danger." The figure's eyes snapped open. Not with panic, not with confusion, just cold, quiet awareness. It sat up, turned its head with mechanical precision, and locked eyes with Varela. "Designation confirmed," it said in a voice like stone wrapped in silk. "Executor class, Varela Seren, renegade. Condition, active. Sentence, extermination." Callan raised a finger. "Counterpoint, have you considered therapy?" The waker stood, flexing its limbs with a disturbing lack of joint resistance. "Obstruction will be neutralized." Flick fired a pulse beam. It bounced off the waker's armor like a disappointed rubber ball. Varela activated her blade, the humming energy edge snapping into focus. "Callan, run!" He looked at her, then the waker, then back. "And miss this incredibly poor life choice? Never." She lunged first. The waker met her strike midair. Sparks flew. The floor cracked beneath their feet. Callan ducked behind a fallen drone and yelled something motivational, possibly involving obscure Terran sports metaphors. Flick deployed a mini-turret that immediately turned and shot itself in the leg. "Weapon AI has philosophical concerns." The fight tore through the chamber, each blow seismic, but Varela didn't falter. She fought not as a queen or a soldier, but as someone who had once believed in justice and then been abandoned by it. The waker's systems began to glitch, not from damage, but from conflict. It hesitated, looked at her again. "You are not aligned," it said. "Your profile does not match." "No," she said, "because I'm not who you remember. I got upgraded." The waker's eyes flickered. "Processing." Callan peeked from behind the drone. "Can we vote on not dying today?" The waker stepped back. Not deactivated, not defeated, but paused, as if waiting for something. "We need to move," Varela said. Callan grabbed the plant from his bag. "Don't worry, Fernie. Things are only mildly catastrophic." They fled the chamber, Flick rolling at full panic speed, Varela leading them into the dark, and the waker watching from behind. Its mind uncertain, its orders unsteady, and something new sparking in its code. Something not unlike doubt. The waker didn't follow, not right away at least. That was the good news. The bad news was everything else. The tunnel they'd fled into was only partially mapped. The atmosphere was steadily thickening with corrosive gas. And Flick had decided this was the perfect moment to begin his end-of-life poetic mode. "I float like a wheel in the storm," Flick recited in a monotone as they rushed down the incline. "Broken, dented, yet still noble, awaiting the scrapyard's soft embrace." "Flick," Callan grunted, half dragging a heat sensor while keeping the potted plant tucked under one arm. "Not now. Your existential crisis can wait until we're not about to be turned into sci-fi salsa." "I just thought it was a good time to process feelings," Flick replied. Also, sensors show a 94% chance of imminent doom. Statistically, this is the best time. Varela didn't speak. She moved at a steady pace, cutting through the sealed bulkheads with swift arcs of her pulse blade, her gaze flicking to the ceiling every few seconds. Whatever the Waker had been processing, it wasn't idle contemplation. She knew that silence could be strategy. Callan skidded to a stop behind her as she sliced open a reinforced access door. The corridor beyond flickered with unstable lights, casting everything in a jaundiced pallor. A welcome sign above them read Sector E7, Hydroponics and Psychological Reintegration. Finally, Callan said, a room that understands my needs. They entered the chamber, and the stale scent of plant decay and expired hope met them. Rows of hydroponic trays lay in disarray. The nutrient lines pulsed sporadically. Most of the vegetation had either died or mutated into small, hungry-looking bushes with too many teeth. Callan turned to Varela. Okay, but hear me out. We take the angry shrub, weaponize it, and sick it on the Waker. Guerrilla gardening. Flick beeped disapprovingly. Pun detected. Sanity level dropping. Noted, Varela muttered. She touched one of the control panels, fingers flying over long-abandoned interfaces. Some systems are still operational. I can divert auxiliary power and trigger a localized EMP if the Waker enters. Downside? It might also fry Flick. I've lived a good life, Flick said flatly. Short, full of sass, minimal regrets. Wait, Callan said, peering at a monitor. What's that signal? That's a ping. External. Long-range beacon. It's broadcasting. Varela snapped her head around. Where? He pointed. There. That tower outside the crater. It's been silent until now, but something just activated it. Frequencies bouncing across old command channels. She cursed in a language that made Flick restart his auditory buffer. That's not a rescue signal, she said. That's a flare. A call to arms. Who answers those anymore? Callan asked. She didn't reply. The look on her face said enough. Outside the hydroponic sector, thunder cracked again. Not seismic this time. Atmospheric. The kind of pressure drop that meant incoming ships, not friendly ones. Callan pressed his forehead to the cold wall. So to recap, we found a dormant murder machine, woke it up, triggered a system-wide alarm, and now probably half a dozen ex-military warbands are going to descend on us looking for souvenirs. Technically correct, Flick said. Also, you're very sweaty. It's stress glow. It's despair glow. Varela brought up the tower schematics. If I can reach the top of the communication spire, I might be able to scramble the frequency before it completes its data burst. But I'll need time. Callan frowned. You're going to climb a decaying tower while bounty hunters and ancient death robots start playing tag below? Yes. Do I get a say? No. He sighed. Thought so. Well, then I guess I'll be your distraction. Flick turned toward him with what might have been admiration, or perhaps just a glitch in his new eyebrows. You're volunteering to be bait? Yeah, Callan muttered. Because I'm apparently too dumb to live, too stubborn to die, and too emotionally attached to a potted plant named Fernie. It's a fern, Flick deadpanned. She's a lady fern. Show some respect. The plan was simple. Not good, just simple. Varela sprinted toward the comms tower through crumbled infrastructure, leaping over molten cables and rusted drone husks. Callan, meanwhile, returned to the Waker's chamber with Fernie strapped to his back and Flick playing loud polka music through his external speaker. Subterfuge activated, Flick declared, vibrating with every accordion note. The Waker turned as they approached. Its posture was no longer rigid, but inquisitive, like it had questions but hadn't found the words yet. Callan held up his hands. Hi, still me, still a non-threat, just here to stall you with banter and extremely questionable music choices. The Waker tilted its head. You are insufficiently armed. Emotionally or physically? Both. Well, now that's just rude. Back at the tower, Varela climbed. Each step was a gamble. The steel groaned beneath her. Power flickered in dying pulses through conduits that had once fed command nodes. She reached the top just as a ship broke orbit overhead. A sleek, sharp predator with no markings and all the charm of a tax audit. She activated her blade, plunged it into the panel, and rerouted the burst. Not to a command fleet, not to any Empire remnant, but to one location, an abandoned medical satellite in orbit, barely operational, logged only as Sanctuary B-22. The message was simple. She's not gone. She's not alone. She turned, watching the sky shift as the burst ended. A new signal blinked in response. Faint, but real. Someone heard. Back in the chamber, the Waker stepped toward Callan. Flick whirred in front of him, ready to deploy his last resort defense. A confetti bomb. Then the Waker stopped. Looked at Fernie. Its glowing eyes flickered. Callan whispered, "That's right. Behold the power of foliage." "I remember this," the Waker murmured. "Not the plant. The presence. The waiting." "You're not just a weapon," Callan said softly. "You're lost. Like her." Silence hung between them. Then the Waker lowered its arms. Not surrender. Not defeat. Something quieter. Recognition. Above them, the sky shimmered with the arrival of others. Not soldiers, not war machines, but one ship. Small, old, coming home. The ship that descended was shaped like a spoon. Not a weaponized, razor-sharp death spoon, just a regular one. Curved, modest, and a little scratched on the underside. It looked like someone had parked a breakfast utensil in orbit and forgotten about it. This, according to Flick's analysis, made it statistically the friendliest vessel they had seen all week. Callan stood beneath the cracked sky as the spoon ship touched down with a hiss of stabilizers and a groan that sounded remarkably like someone sighing before opening a reluctant jar. He held Fernie under one arm and watched Varela approach from the comms tower. Limping slightly, her hair damp with ozone and defiance. Her long ears twitched at the sound of Flick reloading his confetti cannon. "Let me guess," Callan said. "That ship belongs to someone you thought was dead, exiled, or terminally grumpy." "All three," Varela muttered, staring at the descending ramp. The ramp creaked open, revealing a short alien man wearing a crushed velvet tunic, an eye patch over one eye, and what could only be described as the worst attempt at a mustache in 5 galaxies. "Varela," he shouted, "still taller than me, still terrifying. It warms my second heart." Callan blinked. "Friend of yours?" "That's Harkin," she said. "He used to run intelligence for the Royal Armada. Then he faked his death, staged a mutiny against himself, and opened a floating library for retired assassins." "I didn't even feel like you glossed over some important details." "I did." Harkin hobbled forward, arms open, then stopped short at the sight of the Waker. The ancient war construct stood perfectly still behind them, its posture uncertain. The vines of the hydroponics plant still clung to its frame like a lopsided crown. "You brought that thing back online?" Harkin asked. "She woke up," Varela replied. "She remembered." The Waker tilted its head. "I am not a thing. I am designated Solace 47. Harkin squinted. "Solace, huh? You sure you didn't misread your core directive?" "I was designed to neutralize threats with surgical precision." "And now?" The Waker glanced at Callan, then at Fernie. "Now I garden." There was a long silence. Then Flick beeped. "I propose we open a gift shop. It will feature plants, poetry, and 0% chances of doom." Harkin rubbed his temples. "You dragged me out of retirement for this?" "No," Varela said. "I sent that signal because something has changed. We are not what we were. The systems are still broken, still clawing for control. But something better might start here. Quietly, with a spoon ship, and a human who talks to plants." Callan raised a hand. "Still right here. Still not sure how I became the emotional nucleus of this interstellar therapy session." "It's the eyebrows," Flick said. "They radiate trust." Harkin gave a heavy sigh and waved toward the ship. "Fine. I'll relay the update to the old networks. Tell them the Queen isn't dead. She's growing ferns and rewriting protocols. That should confuse the hell out of everyone." "Perfect," Varela said. As they boarded the ship, the ruins of the moon shimmered behind them. Below, the systems they'd reactivated began to shut down. Not in failure, but in peace. The Waker, now Solace, followed them silently, careful with each step, as if afraid to break something delicate. Inside, Harkin brewed tea made from some questionable moss and passed around mugs that hissed suspiciously. Callan took a cautious sip and decided it tasted like betrayal and burnt mint, but smiled anyway. "So what now?" he asked. Varela sat beside him, her armor dusty, her gaze soft. "Now we find others, the ones who were forgotten, the ones who chose not to fight. Maybe we build something new, small, honest. And if the Empire remnants come looking for you," she shrugged, "let them. They won't find the same Queen." Callan leaned back in the creaky seat. You know, I came here thinking I'd maybe salvage some rare tech, find a decent data core, and head home. And now? He looked at her, at Flick napping under a thermal blanket, at Solace watering Fernie with a spritz can. Now I think I'll stay a while. Someone's got to keep the ancient death robot from overwatering the furniture. I heard that, Solace said. Callan grinned. Good. That means your sarcasm module is fully functional. Harkin stood at the helm, muttering about kids these days and mutinying from retirement, but he didn't turn the ship around. He set a course for the edge of the known systems, away from wars, away from ruins. As the stars stretched before them, Varela rested her head against the viewport. You're not like other humans. Callan shrugged. Most humans I know aren't. Number, you stayed, when there was nothing to win. There was something to save, he said. You. She closed her eyes. No one had ever come for me. You're not no one, he said softly. You're you. She smiled. Just a small, strange thing. But it was real. The spoon ship vanished into the stars, carrying a queen without a throne, a robot without a war, a human without a plan, and a plant named Fernie. Somewhere behind them, the system still turned, broken and cold. But in one corner of the galaxy, something had bloomed.